Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. Ms. McGuire has just indicated we're going to start with item 3 first. So, Essie, go ahead and take it through the packet.
Thank you. And this item is it's really a rather technical adjustment that the council is required to approve. It is a transfer among categories in MCPS. However, this is a transfer related only to federal and state grant dollars. And as you know, every year the MCPS has a provision, much as do the other agencies, that allows it to access federal and state grant dollars during the year. Because of the categorical structure of the budget, they are required at the beginning of the year to set out categories in that provision, and then often at the end of the year the council does need to help them realign the categories to reflect actual expenditures. This isn't any new money, it's not different money, it just again is expenditures of state and federal grant dollars, and it aligns the expenditures with the categories for the end of FY13.
Very good. So that seems like a pretty much a no-brainer. If my colleagues agree, we will, without objection, go ahead and pass that on.
Okay, thank you. And then that takes us back to the beginning of your agenda, which would be item number 1, which is the monthly financial report of MCPS. And this report reflects. It was presented to the Board of Education in June. It reflects activity through April 30th, and it again shows that MCPS currently projects a total year-end surplus of $21.8 million. This is this projected surplus is an increase of $3.6 million over the projection that the committee last reviewed during the spring. Of course, during the spring in your budget deliberations, you did take a couple of different looks at the financial reports as they were going through their process and your process at the same time. And did look at their financial conditions there. Again, this does show that the surplus has improved that MCPS is projecting, and again, that does follow typical patterns as in past years. The top of page 2 of your packet shows all the categories with the approved budget level for FY13, excuse me, as well as the balance that's currently projected in each, and it just shows you relatively as a % of each budget category what that represents. At this time, MCPS is not currently projecting deficits in any category, and as you know, that is often one of the purposes of the year-end transfer is for, and again, this was just for the operating budget, different from the transfer you just approved. Often if MCPS has any deficits in a category, they do need to request a transfer from the council to move surplus funds from one category to another. If these expenditure projections hold, MCPS may not need that request, and certainly Mr. Klossing, who is here, can speak to that. Just one more, really briefly, there is a projected revenue surplus as well, and that does relate to state revenue for students in non-public special education programs. This issue is discussed more thoroughly in the financial report that's attached to your packet, but essentially it does reflect higher state payments for more students attending these placements, and some at higher costs. And again, as you know, MCPS does bear a portion of that cost burden as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. McGuire. My question, before I turn it over to my colleagues, is we did have many conversations about the unappropriated fund balance during the budget, so we still are seeing a pretty large amount of unappropriated money in the fund balance. I think that is going to turn into a policy conversation moving forward, which I think we need to get our heads around on this committee, like right now. And I want you to tell me or talk to us about the difference between this revenue surplus and the unappropriated fund balance, what the difference between the two is, because as I look on page 2 in the chart, when I see a $12 million projected balance and instructional salaries, I just want to understand what is in that column and why are those figures showing that way.
Sure, and I can do this briefly, and then certainly Mr. Klossing can give any additional specifics that are needed. As you said, the unappropriated fund balance for MCPS at this point does reflect a number, it reflects an accumulation of surpluses over a number of years. And as you know, in some degree that's unusual to how it has been in past years going back, say, 6 or 7 years, in part because MCPS, as the other agencies did, had years of the hiring restrictions, expenditures, spending, savings plans is what I'm trying to say, expenditure restrictions.
But even
And-
when that was in place, MCPS still carried fund balance year over year.
For the last couple of years, yes, those fund balances have accrued, and each year the council has appropriated a portion of the fund balance as a resource for their next year's budget. And so what will happen is what the council did was appropriate nearly $27 million of unappropriated fund balance to the 14 budget. Based on these projections and that recent council action, MCPS will still have $18.3 million going forward unappropriated into future years. And again, what would then happen would be that whatever happens to the 14 budget would be added to that balance and available to the 15 and so forth.
We get all of that because we've been paying very close attention to it. My issue here is, what are we going to do as a council, as a policy decision or direction for the council on these very large unappropriated fund balances year over year that MCPS is showing? We have that on one hand, and on the other hand, we have the issue with MOE, which, the board and the superintendent have come back saying they need more money. How could both be true, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and I think that may be a question I should leave up to MCPS. I certainly don't want to speak for them.
Well, you don't have to speak for them, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues if they have any comments at this time. But I would like to schedule a meeting probably in September coming up with, maybe it has to be a joint committee. It might need to be with GEO as well to discuss, policy implications for these very large unappropriated surplus funds.
Certainly. I guess I would just make one additional point. As you said, I think that, the dynamics around MOE the past few years have certainly caused a lot of fluctuations and issues in this budget as with other budgets. I do think that, going forward, I do think going forward the issue might resolve itself differently.
Well, I think the issue is equity and fairness to all the other county agencies that have already been told that they got to look at 5% cutbacks already for next year. So in one agency we have enormous, unappropriated fund balances moving forward year after year, but then we have other agencies that are barely hanging on, and we're already asking them to cut back. So I want to figure out what should be done to make it more fair and equitable across all county agencies when it comes to how these funds are being distributed. It's just an issue that I think is very important for this committee to take up. Comments or not?
Yeah.
Councilmember Rice.
Let me just, sorry.
You turn back on.
I just wanted to echo what Chair Irvin said. I think that it's extremely important for us to understand moving forward just how we do this. And I think it's an excellent point in that we have got to wrap our heads around why we continuously have a large fund balance, but then continue to say that we need money above maintenance of effort. And so we just want to make sure that everybody's conversation is wrapped around the same thing. I think that, especially when it comes to instructional salaries, there was a lot of conversation about the fact of us needing additional money over maintenance of effort. And I remember the conversation being because we needed to increase teacher salaries, and that's where the money was going. So if that's the case, then why are we still having a projected fund balance? And I think that's what Chair Irvin was getting at. So I'd love to hear what the answer to that is, and I think that you're right. Moving forward, when it comes to our budget implications, we really need to understand that so that we can allocate the proper amount of money moving forward, because just having it and then using it again is still wrapping it up within the school budget when it could possibly be used for something else. Not. We can't use it after it's been allocated. But I'm saying if we hadn't put it in before, and we just need to have a total conversation about what this all means for us and how we, will move forward. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Rice.
Yeah.
I was going to see if MCPS wanted to respond to a comment before I had a question too. But
Well, we have people here from MCPS, and this is Mr. Klausing, Director of Office of Management and Budget, who is not a decision maker. He's not the superintendent, nor is he a member of the Board of Education, but if he would like to attempt an answer to that, feel free to do so.
Well, I can assure you that when we go into a fiscal year we have a plan to spend every dollar that we request. Things happen over the course of the year that unexpectedly result in these balances. It is only 1% of our total, and we have a really rigorous review process doing financial projections every month over the course of the year, and as these balances become projected, we report them to the board and obviously share that with you to keep you apprised of how things change over the course of the year. But in the size of the budget that we have, things do occur unexpectedly that result in these balances.
And look, I recognize that it's about
1% of your total budget, and that is true. On the other hand, during the budget deliberations, we often hear, if we don't get the full amount, then we're going to have to make all kinds of cuts, and so there's a disconnect between the general results from year to year, where there's usually a surplus of about 1%, which is not a huge surplus in the scheme of things. But then the rhetoric during the budget is, if we don't get 100% of what we're asking for, then we're going to see real negative impacts to the instructional program. So that's the disconnect that I think is present. I do have a specific question about the instructional salaries. It mentions that the number of vacant FTE positions, full-time equivalent positions, is 185, which it says is the same as reported last month. Where are those? Can you break out those positions in terms of where they are in the system, or what types of subjects or grades?
I don't have those details with me right now, but they would be school-based positions that are spread out over our 202 schools. If you wanted more information, we could certainly try to.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to know if they tend to be concentrated or whether they're just completely random in terms of how they're spread out.
And I think it is fair to say that those are vacancies, and correct me if I'm wrong, that by and large will be filled with substitutes. They're not going to be held vacant to the same degree. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Long-term substitutes principally make up the shortly where we do have those vacancies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks.
I also want to close on this note, and that is we had an OLO conversation about the achievement gap, and we have some more OLO studies coming up on how minority students and students who are poor are actually doing in your system. And so I know that a few weeks back the board approved a new plan, which is going to be a plan that will start to begin I hate to use that word holistic because it's getting overused, but approaches that MCPS is going to undertake to begin to close that gap. Now, when I see that you have this huge year-over-year unappropriated fund balance, I'm wondering what is the connection between those funds and your new strategic plan? I think we need to talk about that, because it's not like you don't have the money, which is what we, as Councilmember Andrews just laid out, we hear that every year. Well, we don't have the money, and if you don't pass the budget, oh, woe is me, horrible things are going to happen to students. And then we find out that we have this enormous, as you say, only 1%, but when you have over a $2 billion operating budget, 1% is a lot of money. So what is going to be the plan to utilize these funds to help close these gaps? And other things that the superintendent and the board have indicated that they were going to work on in the coming years. So these are the disconnects, and we would like to see how they all line up. So we appreciate your efforts and for being here this morning. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we're on to item number 2, which is the supplemental appropriation to the FY14 capital budget, an amendment to the FY13 through 18 capital improvements program, Montgomery County Public Schools, $5,860,000 for the school security systems project.